We don't know if Satoshi just wanted to create something so people could trade swords and shields in games, whatever. We don't know if they genuinely thought this was something that could take down the banks. We don't know if they wanted it to be peer-to-peer cash. We don't know. We don't know any of these things. We just speculate. Satoshi might be a vegan and hate all this carnivore shit.
Peter, nice to have you here finally. It's a pleasure. Let me shake your hand. So I usually start with the question what we are drinking today, and maybe just describe what's the drink and what's your favorite drink actually. I know that we are not drinking your favorite drink today.
Well, that's a tough one. Favorite drink's a whiskey sour.
Okay.
A good, nice bourbon whiskey sour. But I like red wine. I like red wine a lot. We talked about this last night.
Yeah.
And whenever I travel, I try and taste the local wine, even if it's a country not known for its red wine.
Yeah.
The best one I ever had that wasn't known was in Thailand. They have a lot of dreadful wine. I had one really good one.
Thailand,
yeah, up in Thailand. Yeah, they're not known for their red wine, but you said try the Georgian wine.
Yeah, we don't have this we're filming now in Riga, Latvia, and Latvia is not famous for wine.
No,
obviously, because it's too cold, and we're more famous for beer. But yeah, the closest one decent wineries are in Georgia, I think so. Yeah, cheers for that. Try it. It's a good one. How does it feel being interviewed, not being an interviewer?
It's always weird. I don't really like it as much. I prefer asking the questions. I think I get the opportunity to interview some really amazing people, intelligent people, opinionated people who are very good at articulating the things they're interested in, the things they've got an expertise in. And I prefer, if it's on the Bitcoin side of things,
yeah.
I always struggle because I don't feel like I have an area of expertise. I'm much more interested in just the broader landscape, and I'm interested in the kind of history, the personalities. So I don't tend to spend so much time
on the technical details.
Yeah, the technical, the economics. I don't spend time in the books.
Yeah,
I don't spend time, looking at every upcoming BIP and what it means. And I don't tend to do that, because most of my time I'm more looking into the culture,
mm-hmm.
the personalities, what people are doing. And so I prefer to be on the other side asking the questions, but I'm happy to do it. I mean, I've done it a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I just, when you want to do an interview with somebody about Bitcoin, it's usually on a specific topic. So if you're to interview someone like Adam Back, you might go into the history of Bitcoin, and you might ask him about Hashcash, and then you might interview a Matt Corallo and you want to get into the technical side, or you might interview, I don't know, someone like Mashinsky about kind of money and economics. And I know everyone kind of has their area of expertise and they spend a lot of time in that. Whereas, because I'm interviewing everyone, I don't really have an area of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the only area I think I possibly add a bit of value beyond asking questions is I tend to try and think of the beginners, how novice people will use Bitcoin, and try and be a bit more pragmatic. And a lot of people disagree with me, although I think I've been making some headroom recently.
Okay. So do you have a favorite interview?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot, and it's really hard. It's really hard. I always
at least top 3.
Well, I always say probably my favorite for a number of reasons was the interview with Ross Ulbricht's mother, because the Silk Road was how I discovered Bitcoin.
That was my next question.
Yeah, I was a customer, and that's part of a very kind of interesting part of my life, part of my history, as a previous addict. And so when the story of the Silk Road being closed down hit, that was kind of interesting. And then I wasn't properly into Bitcoin apart from using it to buy on the website. And then a few years later, I get into Bitcoin and properly about 2016. And once I started the podcast in November 17, I was heading out to Austin. And no, I was heading out to the States, and I wanted to interview Ross, but it's virtually impossible. He's in prison. So I reached out to his mum and just said, "Look, would you like to come on the podcast?" And she said yes. Turned out the date we booked it was actually Ross's birthday, which was very unusual, totally unplanned. It was her birthday. I think hers the day before, the day after as well. And that was only like my 12th interview, but quite a personal story. I don't know if we even mentioned Bitcoin in the interview. I did a lot of preparation because I wanted to take care of it. Actually, videoed the interview, did it myself though, just set up one camera. And that was really important for me because by the end of it, because the podcast was a hobby at that point, I was just doing interviews and wasn't particularly skilled at it. And I realized at the end of that, after we shook hands, I had a hug and she'd left. I was like, I really want to be an interviewer. I want to do this as a job.
So this was a turning point for you.
Yeah, it was, and it was a turning point that I also knew that at that point, even I've done nearly 200 interviews now. That at number 12, I knew I wanted to go beyond just doing Bitcoin interviews. I wanted to get into more personal stories. So that's a particularly important and favorite interview. I've got to know Lynn very well. We've done 3 interviews now. Ross has written to me a couple of times. I've written to him, and it's just a very important story to me. But there's other ones I've really enjoyed. The first time I interviewed Andrew Polstra was really good. So I went to the MIT conference in Boston, and we had it scheduled. And I watched his presentation beforehand, and it was something technical, like really technical.
He's very technical.
Yeah, like is it ZK Snarks or something? I don't know, something. And I was like, and I was watching his presentation, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. So I had my notes, I threw them all away, and we just sat down and we just jammed for an hour and a bit. It was really funny. He's a great person to interview, and everybody who listened to it came back and said that they loved it because he was just brilliant. And then I also did an interview with Krista Rose and Junseth, who used to have Bitcoin Uncensored. That what do they say? You build stand on the shoulder of giants. I mean, their show. I was aware of. I'd watched a few of them. They had a great vibe between the two of them. They used to do that thing where they would film a show in a toilet at a conference. I mean, they were brilliant. And then someone said to me, "Oh, you should try and get Junseth on." And I didn't know Junseth as well as Chris. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, why? What's the angle?" It's like, well, find out about, when their relationship broke down. And I was like, okay, tell me all about this. This is one of the things starting essentially in 2017. There's all this history you don't know about. And there's so much I don't. I was like, well, tell me what happened. So I got the story, and basically they'd fallen out. They hadn't seen each other in 2 years. So I reached out to them both and said, look, can I get you two together for an interview? And they both said yes. I was like, all right, I'll come to Miami. So I booked a hotel, and I was very conscious that they shouldn't get in the lift together. So I timed it so one would come first, took him up to the room. And then I think it was Junseth came first. Then I went downstairs and got Chris. So then we all went in the room together rather than all standing in an elevator being awkward. And they used to do that thing where they took their shirts off. So I just said, look, let's all take our shirts off. And me and Junseth aren't the best in shape. So the 3 of us just sat there topless, and we did nearly 3 hours, and it was brilliant. And there was like a little tension between them, but they still had it. They still had this thing. You could see that, like, if you weren't in the room, you listened to it, you would hear them talk. But I could see they still had this thing, and it was like these different forces coming at points. They were just vibing totally on side together. And then there were these little moments where they weren't agreeing, and it was like a little bit of a battle. And then it ended, and they just went their separate ways. And I don't think they've seen each other again. And that was really good. I think that was a really good one because of all the feedback. All the people who came back to me afterwards and said, thank you so much for doing that. they're obviously fans of Bitcoin Uncensored. But it's tough, man. You do 200 interviews. There's so many that are important or special, ones that I really liked. I'll tell you one more actually. But this is my other show. I do the other show, Defiance.
Defiance, yeah.
So bear in mind, I've told this story before, but bear in mind, 7 years ago, I was working in advertising in London. It was going okay. Then I got married. Then I got divorced. Then I was a junkie, and then my business collapsed. So 4-ish years ago, my business collapsed. I was out of work. Everything had just gone to crap. So I launched, go through the rest of the story. I launched Defiance, and I have the opportunity to interview Tae Yong-ho, who's the most senior defector from North Korea, and it's in Taiwan. So I'm like, yep, fine, I'll come. So not overly thinking about it, and I get there, and I meet him in the lobby of the hotel, and he's got 4 bodyguards with him. And so we go and get in the lift, and they just stood in the 4 corners of the lift, and me and him next to each other. I'm like thinking, this is so weird. And we go up to the room, and basically had to wait outside. They had to go and sweep the room, and then they guarded the room. And the reason being is, Kim Jong-un wants him dead.
Yeah.
And as Kim Jong-un had killed his own brother, I mean, it's always a possibility. But there's just this moment where I've sat there, I've got the equipment set up, and he sat there with me, and there's the guards outside, and I was just like, oh, this has all got a bit kind of weird. But yes, it's like so many different things have happened over this last 2 years. I feel really lucky and really, really like blessed, because if I hadn't stumbled across this, I don't know what I would be doing with my life. I'd probably doing a job I didn't like. And I've got this new opportunity, so I feel very lucky.
New opportunities.
As a unique wine.
So podcast.
Yes.
Why did you decide that after the advertising career? I think you were some kind of investment manager as well, or you were investing.
No, I mean, I did some crypto trading.
Okay.
So took a year off after my agency collapsed.
Yeah.
My mum was sick. My mum was dying from cancer. So I spent a lot of time with her, and I got into Bitcoin because I wanted to get a treatment for her. And what happened was I started just trading and doing very well, thinking I'm some kind of genius. Obviously I'm not, because the whole market's going bananas in 2017. But also on the back end of my life kind of going through a collapse, I ended up at a yoga retreat in Italy run by a podcaster called Rich Roll. So just through a weird chain of events, I won't go into the detail, but I just ended up there. Went out running with him one morning, and then spent the whole week with him, his wife, 30 other people at this very intense, emotional retreat. Basically, everyone who was there was fucked up in one way or another, and trying to look for some kind of solution for whatever problem was in their life. But we all just hung out. We had this really great week, and Rich said to me, if you're ever in LA, just let me know. We can hang out. And I kind of knew I wanted to meet up and hang out with him again, so I just booked a flight to LA. My friend lives out there, so stayed with my friend. Hung out with him again. And then so it was doing the trading, and I ended up going back and forth. And I was just looking at Rich and thinking, this podcasting thing you do seems really cool. It seems like a good life. You travel, you get to meet really interesting people, and your job is to talk and learn. And I was like, that sounds really cool. So I was like, right, I think I'm going to do a podcast. There was only really one that I was aware of, which was Laura Shin's. I know there were a few others, but that was the only one I was really aware of. And so I just messaged him and said, look, Rich, I think I'm going to do a podcast. How do you do it? And he sent me a link to Pat Flynn's course. He said, this is the equipment you need. And Bitcoin was nearly 20K. So I thought, rich. So I just went onto Amazon and ordered all the equipment to be delivered the next day. And then I messaged Luke Martin, aka Venture Coinist on Twitter. I was like, Luke, you're in LA. I'm thinking of starting a podcast. Do you want to be the first guest? He said, yeah. I said, can you do it tomorrow? He said, yep. So I got the equipment, got on an Uber. I was trying to remember the setup back then, because it's very different from all the equipment I have now. I mean, some of the equipment's the same, but I think it was all in a rucksack or something. And so I went up to his house and we recorded the first show. did the second one not in London, in Leicestershire with Nick Patel, and that was cool. And then I emailed Lop.
Okay.
I saw this picture of this guy with this
beard
and a gun saying "Make Bitcoin Great Again." I was like, "Can I come and interview you? And can I do it in person? And can you take me to shoot a gun? Because I've never shot one." So I flew out to the States. Got to his house, and there was just guns everywhere. It was like, bear in mind, I've never even held a gun. And then, so he took me shooting, which was a really strange experience. And then we recorded interview 3, which was great. And then I didn't do one for a good month or so. And then I realized, like, if I'm going to do this, I've got to be consistent. So from like February, maybe 18 or end of January 18, I then did a show a week, and here we are. 2 years and 3 months later, and you and I sat here.
Yeah, and actually, I think last year CoinDesk named you top 10 person for building a podcast empire in crypto.
Is it them or Cointelegraph? I can't remember.
I think CoinDesk was that.
That was cool.
Yeah, that was cool. But do you have a secret sauce for building and be successful as a podcaster? Because I see now many people. They want to do this for a living. They want to succeed. Obviously, I'm doing this because it's like fun and hobby, and I have a lot of different other stuff to do. But maybe there's some kind of secret sauce or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not such a secret. I mean, I'll tell anyone what I do. There's a bunch of things I think that go into it. I mean, some of it's luck. There's been some luck. I think one of the things that helped me to begin with is the commitment to do all the interviews in person, like the majority. I mean, maybe it's 75%, but in doing that, you get a few things. Firstly, it's a much higher quality interview. Imagine we were doing this over Skype. It'd be entirely different.
Yeah.
So it's a much higher quality interview. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. Usually you get to hang out with them a bit. So you and I went out, had some vodka last night and ate. So we get a bit of time together. And I know we've met before, but if that was the first time, we would have had a period of time to get to know each other and get a feel for each other's personality. But even if you're just turning up and you've got 10, 15 minutes, you still get a feel for that person. So that's good. So you understand more about them and their signals and body language, which I think really helps. The second thing is you have this full vision of the person. So there's less interrupting. I know when you want to speak, and you know where I want to speak, just from little body movements. Yeah. So that really helps. So I think that creates a better quality interview. I think that's one of the things. Then there's a few other things like I've got a background in marketing. So, I focused on the name was important, the branding, the website, the SEO, all that really helped. I think one of the things that helped is the fact that I targeted beginners and novices, and I've never left that. And I've on purpose stayed within that as my audience, because it's a bigger audience, firstly. I think there's a lot more people who want to hear entertaining style podcasts, maybe with like Jack Mallers and Bitcoin Mum together, like laughing and joking, or want to hear my beginner's guide, then maybe somebody who wants to hear about how Wasabi Wallet works. I'm not saying that's not important, but I think that just has a bigger audience. I think a lot of people don't realize what happens in the background. So, people watching or listening to this might go, well, I don't like Pete, I don't like his work, whatever. But one of the things I have done is spend a lot of time trying to learn the craft of interviewing. I don't just turn up now and do them. I've spent a lot of time watching some of the best interviews, likes of Larry King, and just trying to see what they do and see if I can learn from it. I even listen to like Rogan and how he does his adverts, and think, can I learn anything from that? I read up about narratives and how you can construct a narrative in an interview and make that engaging, and and what is the show title? Just the show title, not clickbaity, but what is it? So if you look back at some of my shows, you've got what happens when Bitcoin takes over. Why we need Bitcoin. killing the hopes and dreams of shitcoin bag holders, like coming up with names that draw people into to want to listen to. I think that helps. I've got I'll show you later. I should show you. It's my back office set of Google Docs that I manage it with, like who the guests are, why I'm targeting, what the narrative is. The way I use Twitter, although that I get that wrong sometimes, but I just think there's like, what it all probably comes down to, Max? I just really care about this and really want to do a good job. So therefore, I treat it as a business, and and I really focus on it, and I think about it all the time. I don't just. One guy once said to me, he said, "Well, what's your talent? You just press start and stop on a." I mean, how many have you done now?
I think 10.
10?
Yeah.
And I imagine you feel like you're getting better as you do more.
I don't know. It's up to people to decide. I'm just less nervous. Yes.
Yeah.
Way more confident. Yes. But still, for me, it's a bit easier to do an interview in Russian because I'm a native Russian speaker.
Yeah.
But English also very good. So obviously, yeah, it's getting better from time to time.
But I think it's like anything. You just get better. Look, we've got 3 guys here with cameras and mics. There would have been a time when they first picked up a camera, and they first started videoing, and now they know where to position the lights, how to set up the mic, they might have had 2 cameras to begin with, now they have 3 because they want a shot on each, and just over time you just get better at this stuff because you if you work at it, and I think maybe that's it. And I just think I've also been really lucky that people have really warmed. Some people have really warmed to what I'm doing or understand it and will support it. But yeah, it's
So you are famous for
I'm not famous.
What Bitcoin did. Well, you are famous, at least in crypto community, for what Bitcoin did. And now you recently launched Defiance podcast. Can you tell me? Well, we do understand what is about what Bitcoin did podcast. It's obviously about Bitcoin and maybe some other technologies around that, but Defiance, what about Defiance? What's the main topic? What's the idea behind this?
So, well, the background to it was some of my favorite What Bitcoin Did shows are the ones that aren't really about Bitcoin. So, interviewing Lynn Ulbricht about Ross and what's going on in his life, interviewing sex workers, finding out what's going on in Venezuela. I feel more comfortable doing that kind of work because probably because I find the topics really, really super interesting. And that's not that I don't find Bitcoin interesting, but the topics are so different. You've got a guy in prison for the rest of his life. You've got a country under authoritarian rule, which is society's collapsing. You've got sex workers explaining that financial restrictions make their lives more dangerous. These are really interesting, important topics. And so I just had this hunger to just do something else. And I had that ever since the Lynn Ulbricht one. And then what happened was Alex Gladstein from the Human Rights Foundation, Alex? Yeah. Great guy. He invited me out to Oslo for the Freedom Forum. And when I was there, I said, I've got to do something else, Alex. I need to get in some other topics. So we talked some ideas back and forth, and I was trying to come up with a name, and I just one day came up with this Defiance thing. I can't remember why. I said, I think I've got the name. He's like, great name. And so he wrote the manifesto. Yeah, it's going now. I've had a Bitcoin show on it, and I would cover Bitcoin. Bitcoin's relevant to Defiance, but it's just anything which is either activism, politically questioning things, standing up to authority, personal struggles maybe. Any of those interesting stories that kind of challenge the norms of life. And the shows have ranged from, I did one with Rich Roll, who inspired me to start a podcast because, he was an alcoholic who became a vegan ultra-athlete. I think that's a super interesting story. I went out to Bolivia and interviewed somebody regarding Evo Morales and what's happening there. I was in El Salvador and met a couple who are trying to get drug-addicted kids off the street. So there's a range of topics. But it just allows me to expand beyond just doing Bitcoin.
Who's your favorite podcaster?
Good question. Again, I can't just give one answer.
Top 3.
So it's a bit cliche, but I would put Joe Rogan out there. And the reason I'd put Joe Rogan out there is I think he's really good at holding down a 2 to 3 hour conversation, sometimes 4 hours, and it just seems like he can go on forever. And I'm amazed by it. I have some where I struggle to get more than an hour, and he does it every time, 2, 3, 4 hours, and he's engaging and he's funny, and he's not politically correct. He's got his finger on the pulse of what a lot of people are thinking. I don't agree with him on everything. But he's also he's helped make podcasting a thing. He's helped make that a thing for everyone else, which is very cool. So I don't listen to all his shows because there's too many, but I'll listen to at least one a week of his. I also really like. I'm going to pick a Bitcoin one because I don't really listen to crypto podcasts, but I think Marty Bent is a very, very good interviewer.
Yeah,
I really enjoy his interviews. I enjoy his face-offs with Matt Odell as well. But when Marty gets the right guest and they really start vibing, it's really good. I really enjoy that. And a third one, let's think of the third one. Well, I'll pick Serial. And again, it's a really obvious one because it's the biggest podcast ever. But it's the biggest podcast ever because it's brilliant. They managed to create an audio documentary which everyone was listening to at one point, and I mean her voice is incredible. So yeah, let me. I tell you, I'll put a name in. That's a good podcast, but actual podcaster, I forget his name. It's the This American Life guy. Why can't I remember his name? The guy from This American Life. Anyway, the name will come to me. You can put it in the show notes.
Okay.
Again, he's very measured in the way he talks to people, but he can create a podcast with anyone. He doesn't have to be a famous person. He could be a guy on the street who finds interesting. He can create a very engaging podcast through that. So they're the ones I like.
So do you think that success of the podcast is the guest that you invite, or rather the interviewer who is like, or it's both?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you call success. But I think the guest can make a show, but you tend to go back because you like the person, right? Yeah, I like how Marty interviews people. I like how Joe interviews people. I'll go and check other ones out because I want to hear the interview. But do I love the person? Do I want to keep going back? No, some of them I don't. So Eric Weinstein now has a podcast, and I went to listen to his one with Herna Herzog, and I listened to it because I want to listen to Herna Herzog. I'm not a huge fan of Eric Weinstein's style. I think he's smart, but it's just not my thing. But he gets really good guests. When he gets the right guest, I want to hear it. Whereas, someone I really like a Marty or a Joe, I want to listen to it because I want to listen to how they interview it. So I think it can be both. Okay. I think it can be both. But it's all kind of like taste as well. I imagine there's a huge amount of people who love listening to Eric Weinstein because he's so smart and the way he thinks about things. And I reckon there are some people who cannot stand Joe Rogan because just find him maybe irritating or they don't like his worldview. So, but there's something out there for everyone.
Like, you still have, I think everyone have a list of guests that they want to have on their podcast.
Of course.
Like, let's go with the top 3 again. Like,
so the first one I want is John Simpson. He's head of BBC World News, which a lot of people won't like the BBC because it's state news, whatever. But John Simpson as a journalist is somebody I find very inspirational. When I was 9 years old, I wrote to him a letter. I wonder if I've got. But he wrote back to me. He replied, and it always stuck with me. And I just wrote to him and said, I really like what you do. Can you answer some questions? Have you ever been arrested? What was it like? Like little kid questions. But he wrote back to me. He took the time. This was before the internet. These guys here won't even know of a time. You might not know. How old are you?
33.
Yeah, you probably don't remember. I mean,
No, I know. I was sending the letters, writing, all that stuff.
Well, I mean, my kids don't imagine a world of no internet, but there was a time we didn't have phones, didn't have an internet. God, I sound like an old person, but you would write letters to people, and I wrote to him, and he wrote back, and it always stuck with me. And I read his book, and I actually reached out to his agent and said, "Can we do it?" And they said yes. So at some point, hopefully, I'm going to get that one.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's number one. I really want to interview James Hetfield from Metallica.
Oh,
I just want to do it.
you're a huge Metallica fan, as far
I
as
am. I'm probably a bigger Guns N' Roses fan, but I just think James Hetfield is such an interesting interview because, they've toured the globe. They've sold out stadiums in every country in the world pretty much as a really full-on thrash metal band. That's essentially what they were. And, but they've been through a lot. There's a lot of interesting stories in there, the death of their bassist, the second bassist leaving, the alcoholism, what happened with Dave Mustaine from Megadeth. There's like so many interesting things that's all been covered. I just want to ask my versions of those questions. So yeah, I'd love to interview him. And I mean, if we're putting anyone in the world, I'd love to interview Sean Penn.
Okay.
He's my favorite actor. But I mean, this is reaching for the stars. I think might be able to get John Simpson, the other two. Yeah, you never know.
You never know.
I fancy my chances.
Maybe James Hetfield will tweet now, like, "Let's go to the moon. I'm buying Bitcoin," and suddenly.
What about you? Who do you want?
Well, obviously, I don't know. I didn't thought about it. I'm more like, I would go with more like people that hyping now. It's like Elon Musk, most probably. I would love to interview him. Definitely would love to interview Joe Rogan. I'm also a big fan of his podcast. And I don't know, the third one, you interviewed him. I would love to interview Nick Szabo.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Yeah.
You had an interview with him. So, my question, I usually ask in the end about Satoshi Nakamoto, but if you would had an opportunity to have an interview with Satoshi Nakamoto, not disclosing his personality, like, would you do that?
I mean, only if he, she, they wanted to.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. I mean, if that was somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, Pete, I want to do it. These are my conditions." I mean, of course. But sorry, I missed one. Can I just go back a step?
Yeah.
I want to interview Ross Ulbricht.
Okay.
Without doubt. And I think that their day will come with that. I should have said that. Sorry, just with that. I mean, if they want to, of course, I'd want to do it.
If there's a slight chance that you will know who is Satoshi Nakamoto, and there's a chance that maybe some other people will know that.
I hope it doesn't happen. As much as I want it, and be great for my career, I don't think it'll ever happen, and I don't want it to ever happen.
Okay.
And I don't even appreciate people trying to find
So
him.
You're fine with not knowing who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
I mean, I want to know, just out of intrigue, but I don't care enough to go and hunt.
Okay.
I mean, if people want to have a conversation about it, I will. I don't like to have recorded conversations about it because it's speculating. And if that person... I actually wrote... I don't write that often. I wrote a blog post, but I actually wrote that Satoshi doesn't matter because it's gone.
Well, obviously, yes.
Made a decision. Let's forget about it. Let's move on. But yeah, people love a mystery, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if they did and if they reached out and they wanted to, of course. I hope it never happens.
Yeah, but don't you think it's a smart move was made by him or her or them, not disclosing who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it happened for a few reasons. Yeah. I think if you look at the prehistory of Bitcoin, all the different projects that failed, I think the person, if they're smart enough to create Bitcoin and they're smart enough to realize they've probably finally put all the pieces of the jigsaw together to make this thing work, that if it is successful, they probably don't want or need that attention. I imagine the person isn't an extrovert. So, but we can only ever speculate on why they did it. And it is just speculation. We don't know if Satoshi just wanted to create something so people could trade swords and shields in games, whatever. We don't know if they genuinely thought this was something that could take down the banks. We don't know if they wanted it to be peer-to-peer cash. We don't know any of these things. We just speculate. Satoshi might be a vegan and hate all this carnivore shit, or I don't know. We just don't know. We can only speculate.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating story, though, right?
Yeah, it is. So about Bitcoin.
Yes.
About Bitcoin. That's my favorite part.
Yeah,
Bitcoin. How did you discover that? You already mentioned it, obviously, through the Silk Road, but
yeah, I mean,
can we go in details with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've told it before. It's just I worked in advertising, and then everyone does cocaine in advertising, and all my friends. But my friend, I think he texted me or something, or maybe he called me. He said, "Oh, Pete, I found this website where you can buy coke online." I was like, "What? What do you mean you can buy?" It's like, yeah, it's like Amazon, but it's got all different drugs, and you can buy it online. I was like, "Really? What is it?" It said the Silk Road. So I put it in Google and ended up I couldn't find the website because it turns out it was, it needed a tour. So I ended up on, I think it was Gizmodo or who was it? Gorkum, I think maybe, one of their articles about it. And I was just looking at the photos from the website. And I was like, this cannot be real. So I phoned my friend back and they're like, yeah, no, it's totally real. My friend's using it. You need this thing called Bitcoin and you've got to get a Tor browser. I was like, what's Bitcoin? There's like, it's just digital money. So, at no point was I thinking about, learning about Bitcoin or decentralized money. For me, I spent no time looking at how it worked, what it meant. All I knew is somebody said it's money they can't trace you, because that's what people thought at the time, and you can use it on this website. So I went on your rival, Local Bitcoins. That's where I did my well, not rival anymore, but that was my first Bitcoin purchase. It was back when you had to what did you have to do? You had to have like a photo of you with like a message on it.
Yeah.
And then you would do the bank transfer. It'd be held in escrow and it would transfer it to you. And there's a reputation system. And I remember buying my first Bitcoin. It was probably like $100. And
at that point,
and I probably got one, or maybe I bought like 10. Who knows? Like whatever. And then I downloaded the Tor browser, and eventually got onto this website, and sent my Bitcoin there and bought some cocaine. And then I was doing it all the time because the website was brilliant. It had this review system, so you could just order the dealers in terms of the reviews and get really good, high quality, uncut cocaine. And as a cocaine user, it was brilliant. It was until it wasn't, until you end up doing too much. But I mean, what a great, amazing system. It was one of those things. It wasn't just that I didn't look at the thing and go, "Oh, isn't Bitcoin amazing?" I actually was like, isn't the Silk Road amazing? I don't have to phone up that guy who will say, "I'll be there in 15 minutes," and then 3 hours later he's not there, or you're meeting him in a car park. You've got no idea what crap you're getting. You go home, it's cut with some bullshit. It's like, wow, I'm getting very high quality drugs with good customer service, with no risk, with little or no danger as well. Isn't this better than prohibition? It immediately struck me how amazing this was. I didn't really care about Bitcoin at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did start trading some Bitcoin just for fun, and again made a lot, lost it all like a moron. And
How much did you make?
Oh, I mean, I turned like 2,000 into like 40,000, and then lost a lot. And I was trading, it was CFDs, and I was trading like Tesla stock as well. And I was just didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. made and lost it, forgot about it, and then just forgot about Bitcoin. Just like, yeah, that was it. And then I was watching, the price peaked at 1,200. That was 2013, 14 time. And I used to every now and again go back and go, oh no, it's even lower. It's 500 and 400 and 300. I was like, oh, this thing's dead. And then it kind of did that thing where it hovered around, was it like 150, 200? I can't remember. And it started to grow again. Again, I wasn't getting back into it. I was like, nah, I don't get it. I fundamentally didn't know anything about it.
Okay.
But then my mum got sick, I told you about, and my dad said, I said, look, we should try the cannabis oil. And he was like, how do you get it? I was like, well, you remember I used to do that stuff, Dad? And he was like, yeah. I said, well, that's it. Buy some Bitcoin and do it. So he gave me the money. Bitcoin was like $600 or something, $700. It was December 16. Found Coinbase, bought some Bitcoin, and that was it. Here we are now.
At which point you understood actually that you're willing to do the podcast about Bitcoin? When you researched the market, or you were finally fascinated by technology or something like that?
Yeah, I was finally fascinated by Bitcoin. Yeah. So it was a tool for the Silk Road.
Yeah.
But this time it was like, okay, this is something, let's look deeper into it. But it was more, I was into the thought of cryptocurrency and blockchains.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I can have this private currency here, and I've got Bitcoin here, and then I've got there's this banking currency called Ripple, and there's like, and there's this, all these other ones that just did different things. I was like, this is, because I lived through the dot-com boom. I was like, this is the same thing. And that's why I always say to people who, like, don't be overly hard sometimes on shitcoiners, or just be a little bit empathetic. These people aren't just being morons for the sake of it. I get it. I believed it. I was like, this makes sense. And then over time I realized it was all bollocks and didn't make sense, and became hardened to Bitcoin. But that was after starting the podcast. And then I just became more and more interested in it, and spent more time. I always took more of an interest in the freedom, human rights side of things than I did the tech as such. Mm-hmm. But you have to then learn a bit about the tech anyway.
Yeah.
A little bit.
And you sticking with the idea that basically there's nothing worth in crypto except of Bitcoin, or you have other projects that you follow, or other altcoins or shitcoins that you like?
I'm not really. I mean, I'm interested in watching Ethereum play out as just an observer, because you've got this whole group of people who believe Ethereum is going to be incredible and believe it is already, and it's going to do so much for people, and it's great for open finance and blah blah blah. Right? They believe that. And then there's a whole group of people like, this is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. What are you doing? And it's like, how can two sets of people be so diametrically opposed? But they are. I'm more with the Bitcoiners, or the people who think it's nonsense and can't scale. I can't argue why, but when I see the articulated reasons, I tend to agree with the Bitcoin people. So it's really interesting to see that play out. I'm not such a maximalist. I think it won't exist in 5 years. So that's one of those things you've got to say, well, what is success failure? If it's still there in 5 years, is it a success? There are stable coins.
Depends on the state, how it exists in 5 years.
Of course, but not everything lives forever. We used to have a telephone at home. You have to turn the number. I just have a mobile. I don't have a phone at home anymore. Things have a shelf life. Sometimes it can be years, decades. What was the shelf life of a Tamagotchi? Was it a year or two? Now get away from what people might think about the way Ethereum's been marketed, people losing money. Can it do a thing? Well, it has stable coins running on it. Can somebody make a choice to buy a bunch of that stable coin in England and then send it somewhere in Australia and avoid the banks and is there something? You can do it. Whether or not it makes sense is a different story, but you can do it, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not such a maximalist. I would say I'm more of a maximalist. I just think long term it's a stupid idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not such a maximalist. I can't say, well, look, it's there and people are using it. I've got no interest in buying on it, anything on it myself. I won't ever buy or invest or trade ETH again. I have mild interest in Monero. It's interesting. I like the way it came to be. I like Fluffy. I think he's a cool guy. Will I buy, trade it? No. Outside of that, no. There's nothing really that interests me. I kind of want most of it just to kind of just disappear now. Also, I'm not such a maximalist. I don't think somebody can't do something in the future. Like if somebody creates something, then and it is another cryptocurrency.
Rational maximalism, you're like.
Well, Bitcoin rationalist. That was Lily Liu did a show called Bitcoin Rationalism with Lily Liu. Yeah, but I it's not about being open-minded, but it's just about just being realistic and just allowing people to do what they're going to do. And if somebody presents something that is interesting, I'm not going to just go no just because it's not Bitcoin.
But you had a backlash, and you're still having it with like strong Bitcoin maxis.
I know. Not all of them. I'm getting increasingly people messaging me now saying, I understand why you're doing what you're doing and why you say what you say.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what that was the plan.
Not really a plan. I don't really care if people don't agree with me. If I think I'm right on a certain issue, then I think I'm right. And I think the whole thing around nodes, and I still get a lot of shit for it. I still think I'm right. Fundamentally think I'm right. And
can you describe the situation with the nodes?
Yeah.
Because some people might not know that.
All right.
That
so
case.
What happened was, 2 years in doing the podcast or being a Bitcoiner, maybe it's a little bit less, but yeah, I still had never set up a node. Every time I looked at it, I was like, I can't be bothered. I've got my hardware wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Never fails me. Every time I send Bitcoin, it sends. Every time I receive it, I've never had one failed Bitcoin transaction ever. Everything works. And people are saying, well, you need to set up a node, because if you're not verifying your UTXOs, then you're not a proper Bitcoiner, you're not self-sovereign. And I'm like, well, okay, I understand what you're saying, but this is working for me. And I was thinking, what is a node? I know what a node does, right? But I was like, what is it to me? What do I do? Like, does that mean I have to set it up and I have to transfer my Bitcoin from my hardware wallet to my node, or does it talk to my node? What somebody said about an Electrum wallet, I was like, and you need Tor for your privacy. And I was just like, it's too much hard work. I can't be bothered. Now, the point I would make is that there's what I should do and what I could do. Now, I should set it up, and I could if I really wanted to. But I think it's much more useful just to make the point, like if I'm feeling like this or others, and I know there are, because so few people do run a node, like as a percentage of people who hold Bitcoin. So I was like, right, I'll just put it out there. Come clean. So I put out a tweet and I said, look, I'm sure I'll get a lot of shit for this, but I don't have a node. I mean, I've got one, but I've never set it up. This is the reason why, what I've got's working for me. It's a bit intimidating, blah, blah. And obviously I get a boatload of shit to begin with. People still troll me with that and say, oh, is this from the guy who can't set up a node? It's like, I can set up a node. I've engineered a podcast. I set up my website. I do the SEO. Like, if I really want to, I can do it, but I haven't, and these are the reasons why. Let's talk about it. Let's have the discussion, right? So then I ended up getting Brian Lockhart on from Carson. We made a show about it. And I recently did another show with Matt, and we argued about why I didn't do it and why I don't care. And I think it was one of those scenarios where we're both right. He's right because I should care. I think I'm right by raising awareness of, I don't think many people are going to do this.
Yeah.
So A, how do you get more people? Or B, what does that mean? Is it dangerous for Bitcoin? And therefore we should talk about it. And I think we're just turning the corner now. I feel like people are starting to think, actually, I think Pete had a point. I've had like emails coming in from people describing my scenario. Oh, I've got a cold card. Do I connect it to a lecture? I'm just a bit intimidated. Like, I think people are just scared.
Mm-hmm.
And having that as proof now, I think has been really helpful. So I think I've turned a few. Well, I know I've turned a few people over to appreciating what I was trying to do with that.